And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Kenneth Grunfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Monday, April 1st, first day of April, April Fool's Day. Got a lot to talk about on the show for today. Before I get into that, just want to remind you guys, as always, to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to go to the following link. That is GSMCPodcast.net. Again, that really helps the show, makes the show more interactive between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. Again, that is GSMCPodcast.net. And as always, it is displayed on the ticker on the bottom of the show segment down below. So with that being said, let's get into what we are going to talk about for today. So we're going to start off the show, talk about some more Brandon Aiyuk stuff, as well as talking about Arik Armstead as well, with him leaving the 49ers. Well, the 49ers releasing him, and then he ended up joining the Jacksonville Jaguars. So we'll talk about the reasoning behind that. So we'll get into that, as well as, like I said, the Aiyuk stuff. Then in the second part of the show, we'll talk about another move that the Jets made, acquiring edge rusher Hassan Reddick from the Philadelphia Eagles. So we'll talk about that as they continue to load up their roster for 2024. They're going all in with Aaron Rodgers. So we'll get into that. Then in the third part of the show, we'll talk about some players that could possibly be dealt before the NFL draft. And then in the final part of the show, we'll talk about some of the risky contracts from this offseason, and as well as looking at some of the remaining free agents. So that's the rundown for the show today. Hope everybody had a good weekend. Crazy sports weekend with March Madness, baseball coming back as well. Again, we're getting closer and closer to the NBA and NHL playoffs. So it was a big sports weekend. And quick thing as a Yankee fan, this weekend was great. It was unbelievable what I saw this weekend. The Yankees sweeping the Houston Astros. So that was awesome. So they start off the season 4-0. And now they play the Diamondbacks, the defending NL champs, tonight. 3-game set in Arizona. So this is great. A great start for them. So let's, well, at least for me, hoping they continue that momentum into this series. But anyways, let's get into the football stuff. So a couple of 49ers, well, one of them now a former San Francisco 49ers player. So obviously we've talked about Brandon Aiyuk. We'll get into him first. That's the bigger story with this segment here. But yeah, Brandon Aiyuk has been the topic of conversation on my show for a while now. Ever since the Super Bowl, I've done quite a few segments on Brandon Aiyuk. And at least the most recent news, the two seem to be far apart. Two sides, between the 49ers and Brandon Aiyuk, they seem to be far apart on a new contract. The 49ers have the option to exercise Aiyuk's fifth-year option on his contract. Aiyuk hinted at a potential holdout if an extension isn't agreed upon, and he's coming off of a season where he had over 1,300 yards and seven touchdowns. He's been their leading receiver the past couple of seasons. He expressed the desire for a new contract that reflects his value to the team. So if the 49ers do indeed exercise Aiyuk's fifth-year option, he would earn $14.1 million in 2024 and then would become an unrestricted free agent in 2025. So I've gone over this several times. But at the moment, it seems that the two sides, the 49ers and Aiyuk, are far apart. And the way it looks right now, Brandon Aiyuk could end up being traded. Now, I don't know where he's going to end up being traded, but at this very moment, it seems like that's what we are heading towards. And that would really hurt the 49ers. Now, they are a well-run organization, and I feel like they'll be okay. But when you look at what I talked about last week, Brock Purdy, the future of Brock Purdy, and the fact that he's eventually going to want a new contract, this is a big part of the 49ers offense that they could end up losing in Aiyuk. And you take him out, that's going to affect Purdy. And I talked about this. And how people on social media talk about the Avengers squad that the 49ers have. Well, when you take one of them out, the offense is different. Now, again, I still think Brock Purdy is a solid quarterback, but, you take away one of his main weapons, it's the offense is going to be different, and he's not going to be the same quarterback. So, if the 49ers don't have Brandon Aiyuk in 2024, and they may still have him, but what could end up happening is, like I just said, he could end up holding out. And again, I go back to that 3-game stretch the 49ers had when they lost Trent Williams and Deebo Samuel. They were a different team. So now if you lose Brandon Aiyuk, that is going to hurt this offense. Now again, you still have guys that could pick up the slack, of course. Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, and of course Christian McCaffrey. And we saw the Super Bowl that Juwan Jennings had. But, they need Brandon Aiyuk. Look at the catch that Brandon Aiyuk made in the NFC Championship game that changed the complexion of the game. It looked like it was going to be an interception. And then the ball was floating around, and Aiyuk caught it off the rebound when the Lions couldn't intercept the ball. And that was a big play in the game. That set up a touchdown, and all the momentum flipped in the game. Went to the 49ers, and they ultimately won that game. So, I mean, that was more of a credit to Aiyuk because the pass that Purdy thrown should have been intercepted, but that ended up not happening. And the 49ers won that game. So now there's a possibility that Brandon Aiyuk might not be with the 49ers. And the 49ers got a lot of decisions that they have to make. Guys are, they're not going to be able to keep everybody. How many times have I said that with teams? But right now, they're at a standstill. And who knows if that'll get resolved or not. Right now, the way things are, it looks like he could be traded. And I don't know where he will get traded to. I mean, I could tell you he's not getting traded to any team in the NFC West. I know that. But who knows? He could be traded to another team in the NFC. I mean, I think the more likely scenario is maybe he gets traded to a team in the AFC so the 49ers don't have to see him unless it's in the Super Bowl. But I don't know. But at least for right now, it looks like he could end up being traded. Especially like now when you see he's talking about holding out. Yeah, not a good sign. Not a good sign. And like I've said, we've seen receivers get traded during the NFL draft. A.J. Brown, Marquise Brown. Brandon Aiyuk could be the latest receiver to get traded during the draft. And like I said, the 49ers are a well-run organization. So if they do happen to trade Aiyuk, I'm sure that they will find somebody. Now, again, might not have an immediate impact, but I think they would be able to figure it out. But the thing I worry about in the short term is how that impacts Brock Purdy. Because if Brock Purdy goes out there now without Brandon Aiyuk and doesn't play well, and I talked about how, the 49ers could be paying him a new contract, well, now maybe the 49ers might say, yeah, maybe we don't have the guy. Maybe we got to go and find a replacement. Because that just seems what's been going on with the 49ers lately is they have the roster. It's just they've had trouble finding that guy to be their franchise quarterback. That's why they went out and traded for Jimmy Garafolo. That's why they traded up to get Trey Lance. Brock Purdy wasn't supposed to be the answer. It just so happened that he got his opportunity from injuries to the other guys. Garafolo, Trey Lance getting hurt. Brock Purdy stepped in and got an opportunity. And he took full advantage of it. Brought the 49ers to an NFC Championship game. He unfortunately got hurt. But the following season, he was the guy. And they made it all the way to the Super Bowl. Came up a little bit short, but they did that with him as the quarterback. But again, still has gotten a lot of criticism. So, they end up losing Brandon Aiyuk. That would be a huge loss for them. So that's really the update right now. Is there's really no update other than they're far apart. So I think right now, the way it is at the moment, he could be traded. But who knows? Who knows? Just it's all speculation, like I say. But the other thing I wanted to talk about is Arik Armstead. So I was a little surprised when the 49ers released him because Arik Armstead's a good player. You know, he's been part of that defensive line for quite some time now. And they ended up releasing him. He joined the Jaguars. He signed a 3-year deal with them, $43.5 million. So he revealed on his podcast, A Third and Long, I didn't even know he had a podcast, but he revealed on his podcast that he felt disrespected by the 49ers' offer of a $6 million deal for 1 year with incentives. He believed that the offer didn't reflect his value as a player or his commitment to the game, team, organization, and community. Armstead had 27 tackles in 2023, 5 sacks, and a defensive grade of 81.9 according to Pro Football Focus, indicating he deserves more than the offered $6 million. Armstead acknowledged the business side of football, but expressed emotional hurt at the process that led to his departure from the 49ers. 49ers released him after he declined to take the pay cut. He ended up going to Jacksonville. And, Jacksonville's getting a good player. You know, pairing him up with Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker. So that was good for the Jaguars. They got a good player in Armstead. Armstead also admitted he anticipated the possibility of leaving the 49ers due to the team's talent abundance and salary cap constraints. Yeah, I mean, that's the main thing. That is the main thing. And that could be, again, which ties in with the Aiyuk stuff, that could be what ends up, happening with Aiyuk is they end up moving off of him because they can't pay him. They don't have the room. So, I mean, you got guys on defense, with Bosa and, the linebackers, Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw. And, well, Dre Greenlaw is obviously hurt going into next year after the injury he suffered in the Super Bowl. But, and then you got on the offensive side of the ball, I just talked about with Purdy. Purdy's going to be a huge cap hit if you end up paying him. And you got Deebo Samuel, you got George Kittle, McCaffrey. I mean, there's so many guys that are going to need to be paid. And, that's why they had to make moves like letting go of Arik Armstead. And that's why Brandon Aiyuk could be traded. It's because they just don't have the room. So, but we'll see what ends up happening. But, yeah, I mean, what Armstead said is true. At the end of the day, and it goes for all the other sports, it's a business. And you may be loved in the organization, but ultimately they're going to have to make tough decisions, and it's a business first. So they asked Armstead to take a pay cut, and it was too much of a pay cut, $6 million, and he said, no, I'm not going to do that. And they ended up letting him go. Look what the Packers did with Aaron Jones. For the moment, the Packers had Aaron Jones and Josh Jacobs. They're 2 running backs going into 2024, which would have been a great duo. But they asked Aaron Jones to take a pay cut, and he said no, and they let him go, and he went to Minnesota. So it's unfortunate, but that's just the reality for these players. So, but let me know what you guys think about both of these topics. Do you guys think that Brandon Aiyuk will indeed be traded? Will the 49ers give him the contract that he desires, or are these two sides in for a breakup? Let me know what you guys think in the comments. So when we come back from our first break of the show, we are going to discuss the Jets, once again, acquiring Hassan Reddick from the Philadelphia Eagles. So I'll talk about that as the Jets continue to load up for 2024. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.